Now, I would say it's time to roll into our very first speaker and a keynote for the Service Design Network Conference 2021. It's no one less than the Chief Design Officer at the Design Council. I was reading through your LinkedIn profile, Kat, and it says that your role is to bring together design disciplines and create partnership collaborations to achieve bigger impact, to speak widely and amplify the value of design, and to ensure design practice is inclusive, diverse, and cutting edge. I think it's beautifully formed. From what I understood, you're going to share your take on how design can and how designers can take their responsibility in helping to solve one of the biggest challenges we have in front of us in our lifetime. I'm really excited to hear that. Looking forward to hearing your story. It's an honor to have you as a keynote, the opening keynote of this conference. I would say the floor is all yours, Kat.
Thank you so much, Mark. And my goodness, what a pleasure it is to be here back with the service design community. And I think this is my 5th Service Design Global Conference, and I missed you all a lot last year. So as I say, I'm Kat Drew, I'm the Chief Design Officer at Design Council, and this is a community that has really inspired and influenced all of my thinking and our thinking at the Design Council about design practice. So first off, just to say a massive thank you to Alex, Birgit, Nina, Uda, Jamie, and everyone here for allowing me the opportunity to share our new mission at Design Council and also the ways in which design needs to change if we are to achieve it. So
Kat, 1 second, because I think there's a practical thing. I think your microphone is hitting something, or something is rubbing against your microphone.
Is that better?
I think so.
All good. Okay. Well, let me share my screen. That must have been my bits of paper, so sorry about that. I'm going to start with something that you probably all know, which is design shapes the world. So very many things around us have been designed. The clothes that we wear, the places and the infrastructure that surround us, the services that we use, and some have been designed really well and others not so well. And designers have got this huge power to make things that shift our collective behaviours. And therefore they also have a huge responsibility to make sure that they are making things that are good for the planet and the people that live in it. And we know this because the climate crisis is really upon us. And in many ways, this might be an example of the impacts of very bad design. It's 10 days to go until the COP26 conference in Glasgow in the UK. And so many minds are focused on this huge issue, the biggest challenge of our lifetime. And I don't need to list the various ways in which we're feeling the impacts of this. And it will depend on the various different countries that you're sitting in. But there have been heat waves in Siberia. There's flooding across central Germany and in the UK and the Mekong Delta, and wildfires in California. And all of these shifts are connected and also set in motion wider changes in biodiversity, whether that's at the scale of the coral reefs, the temperature rises and having an effect on the coral reefs in Australia, or the impact on bats and their ability to hear because sonar can't travel through dry air. And it's also a justice issue. So it's deeply linked to systemic inequalities, with the people responsible for producing the climate crisis quite often furthest from those who are feeling its impacts. And according to Oxfam, the richest 1% of the world's population cause twice as much carbon dioxide as the poorest 50%. And 3.5 billion people who live in countries that are most vulnerable to climate change are facing a crisis they didn't cause. And design has a huge role to play. You know, 80% of the environmental impact of products and services comes from the design stage, the decisions that designers make. And while renewable energy and efficiencies in that might get us halfway to address global greenhouse gas emissions, the remaining 45% come from the products we use every day and the services that wrap around them. And we know that, you know, bits of design, architecture, 49% of carbon emitted is from the construction industries. But that's all about kind of net zero. But actually the other side of the coin, the thing that's not being talked about so much at the moment, is around nature and biodiversity and the huge impact that that is having. And we can reduce all the carbon we want, but if we don't have bees, we still won't have a planet to live on. So we are going to have to redesign almost every aspect of our lives. This is the biggest design challenge that we will ever have. Not only in making materials and processes that are more sustainable and less extractive, but also designing products, services and places that make it easy and attractive to live sustainably. So Design Council was set up in 1944 to use design, and at this point we're meaning industrial and product design, to deal with the biggest challenge of their day, and that was trying to get us out of the post-war economic slump by producing things at scale, at mass production, that people could buy. And 75 years later, though, we have a new mission, and this is to galvanise the 1.69 million strong UK design community, and with the help of our amazing global partners like the Service Design Network, an estimated 60 million global design community, to design with the welfare of the planet as a priority. And we're calling it Design for Planet, and I very much hope that you'll join us. And so we see our role as Design Council as three things: inspiring and motivating designers to show what is possible, providing the skills, tools and knowledge so designers know how to design for planet, and then creating the right enabling conditions in terms of policy and creating the market so that commissioners can ask for designers to work in the right way. And we're bringing this all together in a couple of weeks' time at our festival, and I hope you join us then. So some of the questions that we're asking then is, where really is design needed? And three things. So design is needed to create sustainable and resilient places, with as much emphasis on adaptation to the rising temperatures, as well as mitigating them to keep them below 1.5 degrees, or 1.1 degrees currently. We need to conserve and regenerate our natural resources by being really careful with the materials that we use, and designing not just for one use, but for many reuses, and designing in ways that regenerates, and learning from Mother Nature, who's probably the best designer of them all. And then also to design products, services and places that make it super, super easy and super enjoyable to live more sustainably, and doing this in a really inclusive way so that they are available to everyone and not just those with money. And we need design to be working across all of its sectors, across fashion, product, architecture, UX, gaming, craft, interior, and of course, service design. And in fact, I think in many ways, and particularly for the circular economy, service design is just absolutely critical. So service design can help people live in these adaptive and resilient places, for example, by helping to transition to green mobility as a service. Service design is essential to a circular economy as it wraps around the products so that people can reuse and repurpose and upcycle them. Something that Joe McLeod, I remember, spoke about so brilliantly at the Service Design Global Conference in Amsterdam. And of course, service design helps making living sustainable a wonderful experience and making it easy and attractive for us all to do. So to give you some examples, Port Loop is a place in Birmingham. It's an established island community, just 15 minutes walk from the city centre, and it's won so many awards for inclusive and green design. But it's so much more than the architecture itself. It has got so many services in it, which mean that the community can not just live in low carbon houses, but they can adopt low carbon living. So as well as the 100 new homes, there is also Civic Square and the Yard, which is arts and community spaces. And there's a beautiful set of island rules, which include things like plant whatever doesn't move and no more ironing, which encourage residents to behave in more circular and regenerative ways. And places that are good for the environment also have huge social benefits if they're well designed by services that support them. So I've been talking loads about wetlands recently, loads and loads and loads, because they're great examples of projects that have arisen from a nature-based solution to flood defences of wetlands. It's great at soaking up water, but also they can act as places where people can go and walk and exercise and get fresh air. And one of our experts, Teo Adebowale, tells the story of the Salford wetlands in Manchester in northern England, and how rather than a traditional concrete flood defence, which actually exacerbates the problem because it's got carbon in it, or it emits carbon, it actually, they spoke to the local community, understood what they wanted, which was a place to exercise and be out in the fresh air. And so they recast the solution as this wetlands. And it also has introduced biodiversity and is a source of local pride. But it also can have really good economic effects as well. So just up the road from where I am in London, there's the Walthamstow wetlands, which is also a beautiful events centre. And over in Singapore, there's a new proposal for Sentosa wetlands, which is also, as well as being a natural flood defence, a really important piece of ecotourism. And that's that one there. So moving on to products then, and as I said before, services are just essential to make products circular. Products need to be, which can be reused, need a service to facilitate that reuse. And this is an example from London. So Joe Lang set up Colliebox, which is London's first ever reusable takeaway box. And it's got a data-driven digital service that allows users to easily pick it up, return them where they're cleaned and redistributed. And there's QR codes that are attached to each one to show them where exactly in the kind of distribution cycle they are. And Jo is amazing, not just because she created this design, but also the way she talks about it. If you ever hear her speak, she's in Forbes 30 under 30 women. Listening to her speak, you can quite understand how she brought it to market, because she talks about it in such a hopeful way as a product that can change the world. And moving on to fashion. So fashion has been responsible for some of the worst waste that we've seen in the design sector, with its seasons and fast fashion throwaway culture. But there is also lots of exciting examples which all require services. And Fashion Revolution, I think, has been a really good example of a campaign that has sparked many of this. So it was founded by Orsola de Castro, a British-Portuguese designer, 7 years ago after the social media campaign after the Rana Plaza collapse. And their goal is zero waste across the fashion industry, focusing on fabrics, chemicals and water. And they work systemically, so they don't just think about the environmental crimes, but also the social crimes and the working conditions, but also they design at different levels. So they look at policy, they look at data and transparency, and also these beautiful campaigns, which really reconnect people living in the West who might throw away clothes with people who made their clothes. And humanizing the energy that goes into that makes people value the clothes more and then not throw them away so much. And there's lots of examples where fashion is turning a corner. So there are online thrift and fashion rental services popping up everywhere. Depop is leading the way with Gen Z fashion, and Her and Vestiaire are places where you can rent more expensive outfits. And there's a big market in secondhand bridal wear, I can tell you, having experienced that myself this summer, finally, after 2 years of pandemic. And fashion designers are also finding ways to reuse materials. For example, Elvis and Cressy here make beautiful bags out of old fire hoses, and Jump the Hedges is a beautiful Northern Irish fashion brand creating bags out of industrial sacks. And my favourite example is a collaboration between Hyundai, the car manufacturer, and fashion designers, where they're reusing the offcuts from the car seat coverings. And services are all needed to be able to take those leftover products and reuse them. And then finally, making things easy and attractive. And if that's not the kind of the core of service design, I don't know what is. So a good example here is Safety Net Technologies, which created a light emitting device which attaches to fishing nets that is able to attract or repel certain fishes to avoid overfishing. And they'd built a simple and affordable product, but like so many service design challenges, people didn't know about it. It wasn't designed with people that were using it. So Snook, who many of you will know, Scottish service design agency, they worked with Scottish fishermen to really understand the context in which it was being used, how far fishermen found out about it through word of mouth in the pub, and how you had to reuse it when you're on a very, very rocky boat in the middle of the ocean. And then Steve Lee, who's one of our design associates, helped do a similar thing, but in Peru, again, a very different context, and the service that wraps around the product has to be designed in a slightly different way. And Docomany is a wonderful technology company that has created a credit card that helps consumers understand the carbon footprint of their consumption habits. So you have a carbon limit as well as a credit limit. They've been working with academics to more accurately track emissions, and it's a really good example of a service design that is informative and delightful. So service design, I think you'll agree, has got a huge role to play in designing for planet. But I think in order to do so, it does need to change. And again, this conference, this space that you've so beautifully created over the last 20 years has been a place for many of those conversations to happen. And I've been so influenced, particularly by Justina Vink's keynote at the last time we gathered in person in Toronto, where I also did a workshop, maybe with some of you in the audience, asking how the double diamond has to evolve if it's going to address some more systemic challenges. So what I'm presenting now is a bit of feedback from all of the input from that workshop and some of the wider research that we've done. And this is a quote from Don Norman, who I am meeting actually straight after this conference, who's over in London. He wrote The Design of Everyday Things, which is a primer that many of you will love and know very well if you studied at university. And he's been reading some of the stuff around systemic design that we've been publishing. And he said, almost everything I see is artificial, designed by people over thousands of years. And if people designed it, maybe design can save it. But to do this, everything has to change. So how? So as well as the workshop in Toronto with many of you, we've also been doing lots of design research with designers, asking them how they're designing beyond net zero, talking to a beautiful variety of designers from across product, fashion, service, architecture, and so on. And we've also been doing another piece of work where we've been having international conversations with designers more from the social design sphere about how design has to change if it's going to deliberately shift systems to more regenerative ones. And Jenny Winhall will be talking a little bit more about all of this in detail tomorrow, but I'm just going to share some of it with you now. So some of the things that have been praised about design and service design may no longer serve this new way of working that we need. So lots of design has been around user-centered and thinking about individual user needs, but that's not doesn't always take into account the other people who are impacted by design and the planet as well. We always talk about agile and de-risking innovation, testing out hypotheses, but actually we need to create more risks in our innovation and be much bolder, take a stand, as this conference is saying. We often sell design as problem solving, focusing ourselves down on the smallest problem, kind of isolating the brief. But as Bruce Mouse says, actually, we need to be much more expansive, seeing how designs can not only be good for the environment, but also people. And we don't always necessarily need to solve the problem if we can invite others to design on top of what we create. And again, not seeing things as static solutions, because if you work in a system, what you do is whatever you do will just set something else in train. So actually, we think we need a different set of characteristics, ones which are collective, which are transformative, possibility giving, and understanding the dynamic conditions in which we're working. We've taken all of this, and earlier this year, you might have seen that we published our systemic design framework, which almost sets out best practice in systemic design. And we see designers who are thinking about the collective, thinking in systems and seeing how everything is connected, making things to test out a hypothesis, not just to test out a hypothesis, but to start making and probing and inviting, and also creating a larger narrative about what they're doing. So we've set out 4 characteristics, 6 principles, and a bit of an expanded process. So to go through them then, the 4 characteristics that we see are important are being a systems thinker. So someone who can see those bigger connections, someone like Teo Adebowale, who doesn't just think about what the environmental issues are, but wider sustainable benefits. A designer maker, someone who understands the power of design and innovations tools, like many of the service design organisations who you'll be working with, you can cut through some of the complexity and start by put something in front of people and make it real. A leader and a storyteller, someone like Joe Lang from Colliebox, who can convince people to move towards the impossible and try and get buy-in from all different levels. And then really importantly, if you're going to be able to think systemically, you need to be able to connect and create beautiful relations, like Orsola de Castro from Fashion Revolution. Oops. So we've got 6 principles, and these are kind of expanded out from the ones that we used to use, which are very much focused around being user-centered. So starting at the top, being people and planet-centered. Welcoming, including difference and different ways of knowing. And there's been lots of conversations in this conference about Indigenous ways of knowing. And I know we've got Alex Whitcomb talking to us all soon. Zooming in and out between the micro and the macro, collaborating and connecting, testing ideas, but also growing them, and being circular and regenerative in all that we do. And we've also kind of expanded the process, and really this is much of the work that the workshop I did with you 2 years ago started to explore. So we still keep the double diamond in the middle, although it's a more kind of circular and loopy route, but we also show that there's lots of invisible activity going around the design process, which is really important. So to take you through that, we always keep divergent and convergent thinking, but we see that there's invisible stuff that happens around the design, which is so important, particularly at the beginning, the orientation and value setting, because actually the values that you go into a project and thinking about a kind of regenerative and circular mindset will totally determine what comes out of it. And then also recognizing that at the end, rather than neatly coming down into the finish of the double diamond, actually what we need to do is we need to expand it out so we're inspiring others. Zooming in and out is obviously very important, looking at the micro and the macro, and disrupting and remaking. So using your designs to actually fundamentally question and challenge some of the bigger structures and policies and mindsets. And then, as I say, seeing this as part of a longer continuous journey, so that what you do, opening it up so that other people can join in. We need everyone to design for planet. So we've done all that, and that's in a way best practice, but we've also been doing some work of thinking about what next practice might be. And so this is much more invitational, and we don't have all the answers here. So again, this is yeah, an invitation for you. So we've also brought together some examples of emerging practice, and I will just talk through some of them. So Indy Johar and Dark Matter Labs have been developing a new proposition for urban trees, which sees them as a stakeholder in the city. So on the level with human beings, giving them almost the same rights as us, a key part of the urban infrastructure. And their work is all about not just coming up with an idea, but creating a proposition, which also includes how the deep structure needs to change. So how does the governance need to change? How does the data need to change if we are going to have trees as this key urban infrastructure? And they're piloting it, I think next week it launches in Glasgow. And the other thing they have found, as well as looking at the deep structure, they need to change our mindsets about how we see trees. Looking out of my window now at a beautiful tree in front of me. And there's really lovely examples of Melbourne, where there's a scheme where you can email or write a letter to your tree. So you're building relationships in different ways between humans and non-humans. Alistair Parvin has been working a lot in the UK on housing and the housing system, which is doesn't allow equal access to housing at all. And he's trying to create products and services that disrupt why the housing system is so broken. And he's done a lot of systems mapping, trying to find out where the root cause is. And for him, it always comes down to regulations and laws around land use, which are very, very old. They were put in place in the 19th century or even the 11th century. And his work is all about designing small interventions which have a huge ripple effect. So, for example, WikiHouse, which you can see here on the screen, gives communities control about how they build houses. It almost sets out open source recipes so that anyone can build, taking it away from the power of the developer. Plan is another service which makes the planning system simpler for communities to understand and navigate. And Fairhold allows communities to club together and join their finances in order to afford to build houses. And he always quotes Buckminster Fuller by saying, you can never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change things, you need to build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. Tessie Brisson at Participatory City is trying to create a new type of civic infrastructure that allows participation. And this isn't about a traditional model of community volunteering, which many people think of when they think about community work. And therefore, it's very, very hard to connect it into the local council. The local council doesn't have a participation department because it's too early for them to really get involved. No one's at risk yet. And it's more about freeing people up to participate in exactly the way that they want, whether that's putting on a gardening event or a dance event or starting their own clothing business, whatever it is they want. But what she's done is she's set out some kind of recipes or toolkits for people to use, and it's all called Everyone Every Day. So there is some structure and guidance, but actually people can build off that in a beautiful way. And Kenneth Bailey and Laurie Lobenstein from the Design Studio for Social Intervention in Boston have been thinking about what kitchen and cooking means to us in the West, and starting from a very different place. So they were questioning the deep assumption we have in Western communities that we all have our individual kitchen and we eat as individual households, and in different cultures actually you eat much more collectively. So again, like Indy, they put forward a proposition. It wasn't just an idea, they made something. They're designers, they set up a kitchen for a whole week, just like you would have a library where everyone could come, and so you were experimenting with how it would work, but also they were creating a platform of talks and discussions, bringing together very, very different people, communities, with food activists, with local government, with retailers, to also create a whole range of other ideas which would make public kitchens actually work. And they work a lot with activists, and what they say is activists are very good at saying what is wrong with the current system, but not great at showing what could be. And so they say design is a politics of proposition and not of protest, which I love. And this is a beautiful example from France. Carrefour is a massive supermarket chain, as you all know, and what they wanted to do is they wanted to find a way to show that actually, despite being a huge supermarket chain, they were totally invested in in a sustainable food transition. But no one really believed them, because in France, big means bad. And so they had to do something and act. And they found this piece of law, old EU law, which meant that only fruit and veg grown from certain seeds was allowed. And this had initially been set up to create safe food for us all to eat, but had been co-opted by the agrochemical industry. And it now meant that organic food literally could not be sold. So they created something called the Black Supermarket, which was an act of defiance that drew attention to this law, and they allowed loads of farmers to use their organic seeds to create food which was technically illegal but was being sold. So they now had, and this all actually led to a change in the EU law. So that in itself was brilliant, but they also not only had the consumers' attention, but they had the attention of all the people who worked for Carrefour, who suddenly realized, oh my goodness, my employer is a really ethical place to work, and I've got some more ideas about what they could do. So suddenly they had all these ideas from all of their colleagues about other things that they could do. For example, surveillance in slaughterhouses to make sure that was ethical, programs to shift 2,000 farmers to organic milk production, and even writing sustainability into the governing documents. So they do a competition for new ideas every single year. And a final example from Design Council, we're working with the Mayor of London on a programme called Designing London's Recovery, where we're bringing together 20 design and innovation teams to create new products and services in service of 3 of London's missions. And we're designing in a very different way from normal innovation funds. And this is very much inspired by the work of Jenny Winhill, who you'll hear from tomorrow. So rather than funneling down those 20 ideas to maybe say 3, which we think will work, we're supporting the teams to work as an ecosystem, creating connections between each other's work, and also helping them see how they can have bigger impact, not just through scaling their own idea, but actually working with the GLA to change a policy that will make it easier for someone else, amplifying an undervalued or new mindset for other people to copy, or creating unusual connections to create interdependence or a new collaboration from which further innovation will spring. So to try and bring some of this together then, some of the themes of emerging practice that we're seeing are these. And they're deliberately new language, because actually, if you want to shift something, you can't just use the same language as we've always used. So alternative intentions and deep remaking. So these people are all systems thinkers, and they are starting from a very, very different place. They're not seeing design research as research into what people need, but actually into alternative ways of thinking about the world. And they're making things that shift the deep structure, the governance, the regulations, the rules of the system. So people like Indy and Alistair. And for Design for Planet, we will need to start from a very, very different mindset, place in terms of seeing nature as having rights as a key stakeholder in all of this. Nature has to have a place at the table, and starting with a circular and regenerative mindset. Emergent possibilities. So these are all designers and makers and storytellers, and they're using their design skills to create propositions, something very speculative and radical that opens up the imagination. These don't all need to solve problems. If you can create the imagination space, which then invites others to design into, then that's very powerful. So like Kenneth and Laurie, or Tessie, or the car, for example. And for Design for Planet, this is a creative and not a technical challenge. We've got lots of tech, but actually we're going to have to take some very big creative leaps so that we can reimagine almost every aspect of our lives. And we need to invite everyone to do this with us. And assembling and provisioning the new system. So all the people that we've shared are collaborators and connectors, and they're thinking carefully about who they bring together, making unusual connections, creating more interdependence between things, seeing this as a good thing. The success of one person means the success of someone else, and giving them the skills and tools to create further innovation. So like the work of Cassie Robinson, who's one of the report co-authors, and the work that we're trying to do with London. And for Design for Planet, designers are going to need a whole set of new skills, a whole set of new collaborators, scientists, ecologists, activists, sustainability experts, and a whole new way of measuring their work. And because language is such a powerful way in showing how we might need to shift our practice, language and metaphor, I might, this is all in the report which we published on Tuesday, but to draw out some of our provocations about how design needs to shift. Try these on for size. So rather than seeing your work as user-centered, what if it was collective or planet-centered? How would that change things? Rather than seeing design research into user needs, what about alternative intelligence about how others see the world and how we should live in it sustainably? Rather than putting out a blueprint to show exactly how things would work, what about a springboard that others can jump off? Rather than a prototype to test out what might work, what about a seed that other things can grow from? So in summary then, we are going to have to redesign almost every aspect of our lives. And service design is key to creating resilient and adaptable places, to enabling a circular economy, and to shifting our collective behaviours to more sustainable ones. But service design needs to change to act more systemically, and not just working in a systems conscious way where we're aware of all the different systems around us, but actually developing a new practice that can actually shift systems deliberately but openly. And some questions to ask yourselves then is, how can you design for Planet and see Planet as a user, or even more as your co-designer? How can you start with a regenerative or circular mindset? How can you design something that opens up a possibility for others to build on or design towards? And how can you design a platform where different types of people can come together to exchange ideas about how to design for Planet? So before I finish, I'm going to leave you with two more things. And one is a quote from the economist Kate Raworth, who wrote Day Not Economics. And when we were talking to her about Design for Planet, she got very excited. And she said, you know, absolutely, this is brilliant. And she said, if you're not designing for planet, what planet are you on? And we use this all the time at Design Council as a kind of rallying cry to motivate us in the mornings. And the final thing is our website, www.designforplanet.org. Please go on there. There's a survey for designers so we can understand what skills designers need to design for planet. And of course, you can be part of the movement. So thank you.
Thank you for this hopeful presentation, Kat. So many great examples, so many things that already show what's possible, where it's heading. I think we need these examples, leaders, showing that it actually can be done. The great thing about the design community is that they are curious and that they ask questions. We have some questions from the audience in Brella. I'll give everyone a minute to ask additional questions and take the opportunity to ask one or two of my questions before we dive into the audience's questions. So, Kat, one of the things I'm really curious about is let's imagine you had a magic wand, the typical designer's question. What would you do to accelerate the adoption of this transition?
That's a great question. I mean, I think some of the things that we know from designers is that lots of designers want to design for planet, but don't either know how to or don't feel that it is in their brief to do so. So the client's not asking for it. And I think, honestly, from what I can feel within the UK business community, at least, that is shifting. But I suppose what we would love to do is always make sure that the planet is a key client in the brief. I mean, in a way, planet needs to be commissioning all of our services, right? But we haven't quite got there yet. So if we could have planet in every single design brief, then that would be pretty cool. We're just about to, we've just commissioned a film, a really short 90-second film just about this. And we're hoping that all designers would be able to play it to their clients at project kickoff in order to get planet in the brief. And we'll use our red logo to give that a little bit of credibility and permission if anyone needs.
Awesome. Like that one a lot. Another question, and then we'll get into the audience questions. When you share this story with people around you, what's the number one question they come up with? What's the thing that you always have to explain or defend?
Yeah, I think actually for lots of particularly service design and social designers is, well, what materials should we use? Like, what is the right thing to do? And I think this is because there's the kind of the technical side of Design for Planet. I mean, at Design Council, we're so lucky that we work with lots of landscape architects who know all the technical stuff around sustainable urban drainage, which materials to use, which plants are best to use in biophilic interior design. And from my perspective, because I don't come from that kind of technical world, you know, all of this is new to me. I come from a world of, like, service designers understanding human experience and emotion, but not necessarily the technical stuff. So if we can do, and also this is changing all the time. So 1 minute bamboo is the recyclable product to use, and then it's not, because actually the resin that glues the bamboo together contains plastic. So I think there's a lot of technical information that designers need, service designers need, which they might not have. So part of what I see our role is being able to connect that up maybe with the materials libraries that are there, so that people can feel confident in designing in the right way.
Thank you. Let's dive into, we have about 10 minutes left. Let's dive into some of the audience questions. I'm looking at Brella, and some of them are anonymous. Other ones do have a name, but I'll start with some of the ones that have been upvoted by the audience. And I think we answered the first one already. So I'll head into the second one, and that is related to how would you what would you advise a service designer who's really deep inside an organization, how they can still raise awareness to this systemic perspective? So if you're really deep into the weeds, maybe not at a leadership level, how do you still address this topic?
So I think there's a couple of ways in which you could start, and I think, as I said, lots of it is around what you might do at the beginning of the project. So systems mapping is a way that lots of designers are using just a bit of time to zoom back out and understand where their particular project is within the wider system. And if you want some kind of starting kind of prompts for that, you know, an easy thing is to take the UN sustainability goals and just look through all of them and see where your work not just impacts on one, but say many, and that's a good kind of starting point. And then there's also just a bit of work that you could do to, I mean, I think actually for service designers, you know, you've got the best kind of opportunity ever, because you get to talk to people all the time, and people's lives are these multifaceted lives. They don't neatly fit down into the particular thing you're designing. They've got many different aspects to them. So having a conversation early with people that you're designing services for and just trying to understand the complexity of their lives helps you just situate kind of what you're designing within that bigger picture.
Okay, hope that helps. Moving on to the next question, which is by Jeffrey Allen, who's actually at the UK Ministry of Justice, if I'm reading correctly. And he asks, how do you think national and local governments should reform to promote systemic design principles in government services and government policy making? So, yeah.
Well, great. I mean, well, we've actually been working, we run something called Design in the Public Sector, which is a cohort-based program that we've been running for the last 7 years. And last year it was all around climate change, and we've been testing out the systemic design principles with them. So we take them through the kind of the design process, and they have been applying that to climate issues, whether it's kind of creating flood defences around the City of London, low carbon housing in Plymouth, biodiversity schemes in Suffolk. So they've had all different challenges, but they've been taking the 6 principles that we started with: design for people and planet, inclusive and welcoming difference, collaborating and connecting, zooming in and out, testing and growing ideas, and taking a circular and regenerative mindset, and just starting and applying that to each of their projects. One of the things that they have said, and it kind of slightly contradicts what I was saying earlier, is, you know, they find design is really, really useful because they can map out the complexity, and often people get kind of, I call it complexity paralysis. They get so overwhelmed by all the things that are interconnected, they don't know where to start. But design can help you start, and it can help you because you start making something. But that's not to then just kind of isolate yourself and only focus on one area. You still have to understand the bigger picture.
Thank you. You mentioned this briefly already, but if somebody has missed it, there was a question about how to actually get involved with Design for Planet. What's the best way?
Yeah, so the best way for the moment is to go on our website, www.designforplanet.org, and to register for the 2-day festival that we're having alongside COP in a couple of weeks. You all have so many festivals to go to at the moment. You're so lucky. There's also a really great Systemic Design Association conference coming up in the first week of November. So loads and loads of content, loads of learning. So that's the first way. And register with us, and then we are going to be continuing a program of events, of talks, of workshops, various different things. What I would love to say to you all is, please give me your examples about how you are designing for Planet, but I haven't quite figured out how to receive all that information yet, but that will be coming.
Okay. Yeah, a lot of events happening, so definitely a good time to be in the service design space. There was a question by the brilliant Katie Murray about how to bring Design for Planet into education. Do you have any examples around that?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. And there are some really, really good, well, I mean, within education, there are some amazing schools. I listened to a podcast the other day on permaculture. So bringing kind of at a very, very young age, and other countries beyond the UK do this way better than the UK, but actually getting kids to be out in nature. I think Scotland is just got a whole new set of kind of forest schools to really teach children the value of nature and planet right from the start. Now, whether that's about design or anything else, but just starting there and actually creating many more interactions between nature and planet. So one of the things that we'll be hosting on at our festival is a prototype for an hour of ecology. So this is an idea proposed by John Thackeray, who's an amazing designer in sustainability. And there's an hour for code worldwide, and billions of people have signed up for that. But what about an hour for ecology? That's got to be what we do next.
An hour for ecology. That would be a great thing to introduce for sure. There was a question also around consumerism. One of the things that might be a challenge here is that success is often measured in terms of economic growth, and economic growth is seen as through consumerism. How does this align? How can we merge these two perspectives?
Yeah. So I think there's a couple of answers here. So the first one is that we have to start valuing different things, right? I mean, this is the deepest design challenge is actually we need to redesign at the level of our economic models. And, you know, Kate Raworth and Indy Johar will often, you know, they talk so well about how we need to really disrupt the basic economic models that govern so much of this. And I think we can do that by also showing the importance of environmental value and social value alongside economic value, and bringing that much more into how things are incentivized. And, you know, the B Corp movement is a great example of how that is being spearheaded around the world. And the B Corp movement also has wonderful examples of service design within it. So Octopus Energy is a brilliant example of another thing in which this is making renewable energy and the way that you consume that really, really delightful. And I suppose the other thing is that, you know, we've been talking to lots of businesses who are kind of, you know, obviously worried about how they're going to be meeting their net zero targets. And to start with, lots of them are thinking about operational carbon emission and reducing it, but actually there is growth opportunities. So there's still potential, huge potential for growing kind of consumer experiences, but ones that are sustainable. So, you know, cycling as an experience, that's, you know, consumer products right there. But if they're made out of sustainable materials and they're promoting sustainable behaviors, then, you know, there's nothing wrong with that. That is what we need. We need a growth, a boom in products and services that allow us to behave more sustainably.
Now, we're almost wrapping up. I'll take the opportunity to ask the final question. If your question hasn't been addressed in this talk yet, maybe feel free to reach out to Kat and address the questions directly. But Kat, to end on this note, I'm really curious, like, what's the most important question that is currently on your mind? What's the thing that's keeping you awake?
I think the thing that's keeping me awake, I think, is some of those bigger questions. So one of the things that we're doing at Design Council is a piece of work called Design Economy 2021. So many of you will know we published groundbreaking research into the value of design in the UK. It's 85.2 billion GVA, if anyone's interested. And we're repeating that methodology again, but this time we are also going to value the environmental and social value of design, not only at a kind of aggregate scale, but also provide toolkits and methods so that all designers can also measure it, because what gets measured is valued, and is done. So my big question that's on my mind is, what is the environmental and social value of design? And how can we support designers to really design for that, as well as making sure we've got economics that allows us to live inclusively and fairly.
Would love to get your thoughts and thinking on that in, let's say, 12 months. Let's see how far we've progressed. Kat, thank you so much. I know a few people have been having issues with the stream. Don't worry, it's been recorded, so this will be published online. Once again, thank you for kicking off the Service Design Network Conference 2021. It was great hearing this story and seeing all these hopeful examples. So thank you again, Kat.
My pleasure.
And now we're already heading into our very first break. If you've been having technical issues, sorry for that. I know that a lot of people behind stage are working to fix this. Now, what's going to happen in the break? We have a 30-minute break. There are a few things that I want to share with you. 3 talks are coming up after the break. There will be a chapter spotlight. There's a second stage where you can go to. So a lot of things are going to happen after the break. Don't forget to, what did I want to say here? Schedule your networking appointments. That's the thing I want to share. And the other thing is select the stage you want to be at after the chat, after the break. And there's an exhibition hall, the scavenger hunt. You can do a lot even during the break, or you can just grab a cup of tea like me and re-energize for the next few sessions. I'll be back on stage 1, so you'll see my face back here introducing the next few speakers. And if you move to stage 2, enjoy yourself there, and maybe we'll see each other later throughout the day. Thank you for attending this first keynote, and I hope you'll enjoy the rest of the conference as much as you did this presentation. Thank you, and see you soon.